All right, gang, welcome to this episode of the Dealer Playbook Podcast. So excited that you are here, especially because we're talking subject matter that we don't speak about nearly enough on the show. We're talking about fixed operations. We're talking about parts departments. I am joined by the sales and marketing manager at PartsEdge, which is a powerful tool to maximize the potential of parts managers through technology and a touch of consulting. Kaylee Felio, thanks so much for joining me on the Dealer Playbook Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And, I hear that all the time. Whenever I come on podcasts, it's like, this is something we don't talk about enough. So I appreciate it.
It's like, what's the term, the stepchild of the industry? Because we're always talking about variable. We're always talking about how to move more metal.
Yep.
But I've listened to you on the Fixed Ops Roundtable, and you bring up a lot of valid points, and I think this is where I want to start and really introduce this concept. I mean, it goes without saying, or hopefully should, that the parts department is, I mean, it's a main profit driver for a store. It's the second largest revenue source for a dealership, yet we tend to neglect it as far as mainstream discussions. And so my question for you is, well, why is that? Why is something that can generate much more consistent revenue something that we tend to neglect in conversation?
I think it's because it's one of those things that just kind of works. And you don't have to, well, I guess you kind of do have to work really hard to make it really productive and get, but it's one of those things where it just works. And a lot of times there's really good parts managers out there that just do a really good job, and dealers just kind of let them do their thing. But right now, I think we're running into this thing where parts managers are retiring, or we're having a shortage. People aren't sticking with it. And so we're running into this like thing where we don't know what that parts manager did. And now
Right.
we're like left with, to figure it out. So I think that's why.
That's really interesting and really frightening. I think about, as a business owner myself, really frightening. I mean, especially in an industry where we cling on to buzz phrases like gotta inspect what you expect. But probably to your point, because it's something that just functions, we're not necessarily paying attention to how can we improve this? How can we make it more profitable? So as you work with your clients and the industry at large, what are some of the things that you see on a consistent basis that, given a few tweaks, might just make that department even more profitable and productive?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing lately is we've been talking about obsolescence because it is growing a lot in the departments because there are stricter return guidelines per the manufacturer, and there's just a lot to keep up. And if you miss the windows, then you're stuck with those parts. And then there's the difference of the guaranteed parts and the not guaranteed parts. So there's just so many different aspects to it. But the biggest thing I've been talking to dealerships about is forecasting the obsolescence. So how do you do that? You take the parts that are in this is what we do at PartsEdge. And it's something you can do too if you want to look at a different guideline. But basically the parts that are in the 7 to 12 month window, you take all those parts, or that total, you divide it by 6 because there's 6 months in that. And that's how much your obsolescence is going to grow. So if you don't, like, let's say the calculation's $5,000.
Right.
If you don't have $5,000 in return allowance or accruals, your obsolescence is going to grow by $5,000. So like that's one of the things that you can look at to really improve and be more proactive with trying to offset your obsolescence or maintain it at a low amount, or so.
And you mentioned, so you've got a quick little formula there, but as you dig into it with your clients, I mean, where are they missing the boat, you think, on average across the board in being able to properly forecast for obsolete? This is going to be my new favorite word, by the way, obsolescence. Makes
I
me
know,
sound so smart.
and then my phone just like knows how to spell it, so it's fun. So the question, re-ask that question? I'm sorry.
Sure. Yeah, I know. I had to throw in my annoying little jab of
And then I get distracted and then
I have that effect on people. What are the common challenges you see as they seek to forecast obsolescence on their own? Is there, I mean, is it as simple as just doing the formula and saying, okay, great? What are maybe some of the blind spots that we're not thinking about on the regular?
I think the blind spots really is that the DMS is kind of overwhelming and the reports that need to be pulled to do that simple formula. Um, it's just one of those things where you get to it when you get to it, and oftentimes you don't get to it.
Right.
And so I think that's what we're discovering with our clients is bringing that consistency of like, these are the numbers that you need to look at. This is how you need to look at them. And looking at all those reports and the data so that you can be more proactive. So I think that's where it's falling short is there's the DMS, just there's a lot going on there
Right.
and looking at the data, and that's really kind of where they're falling short.
Right. And it makes sense. You know, I my mind immediately thinks about the narrative in the industry of, hey, yeah, you've got this service department, you've got this parts department, but you're competing against standalone companies out there who that's all they do. They sell auto parts, whether it's I'm blanking on names, AutoZone or you know whatever. In Canada, there's Lordco or Napa Auto Parts or things of that nature. You're competing against these people, and it's not okay for you to just kind of, to your earlier point, let this department do its thing. These companies are paying attention to all of this kind of stuff and constantly, to your point, asking the question, well, what can we do to improve this, to minimize loss, to you know, minimize all these sorts of things? And so what's your take on that? Is it just forecasting obsolescence? What are some maybe things you've learned from these other companies? We're going to talk about your dog in a minute, but after we don't even worry about it. I love it. I love it.
Oh,
Wait, you mean you're a real person,
yeah,
Kaylee?
I'm a real person.
Um, how dare you be a real person in an industry where we're all trying to pretend to be something else? What are some of the things your company and you have observed that perhaps the auto zones and these others, like, what are some things we could learn from and take from them?
I think that they're looking at their inventories and organize. Man, I'm so sorry. Let me
You're
get
gonna
this
have to
one second.
you're gonna have to pick this beast up and show everybody now.
No, I should shut the door.
No,
He's
I
I should pick him up. He's like 80
would you
pounds.
be mortified if I told you I'm not cutting any of this out because I love it?
No, that's fine. That's totally fine. I'm like, oh, I can hear the FedEx guy. And I'm like, and then when you order something, you're like, what did I order?
That's awesome. Um,
Okay,
so
man.
so the yeah, what they're constantly looking at their inventories, to your point.
Yes. Yeah, they're looking at the data, and I think the thing is, I don't really know how the AutoZones or the O'Reillys do it, but I know that when dealerships can really organize their parts into more categories and really assess the true demand, they're able to really see what's going on with their inventories and know what they need to serve their customers. I think that's what
Mm,
it boils down to is you can't just set it and let it go. You have to constantly be looking at the parts. You have to be organizing into the categories to, and the DMS does some of this work for the parts managers. It's just knowing what you need to do every day to be more proactive and consistent.
right. Yeah, makes sense. Um, to that point, call me naive. What is the average based on what your observation is? I mean, how much parts business is a dealership doing? And then can you give me an example, maybe average, without specifics, obviously, just keeping people's privacy in mind. But what are you seeing? Like, what is the average dealership doing in part sales per month? And is that because they're selling those parts into service? Is that or is that actual straight up customers being like, I need a genuine OEM air filter? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. Yeah, I think most dealerships, their business is from the service department. They're all kind of they all vary because some parts departments are heavy into wholesale, so they're servicing their
Right.
shops around them. So
Hmm.
it just kind of depends. But um, inventory size that we're dealing with and seeing like average, it just depends. So like you could have the 5 to 10 million in inventory, and then your sales are in the
Wow.
millions. It's
Wow.
just, yeah, they're producing, they're high volume producing, and it's all connected with the service department and making sure you're pricing everything efficiently to get the maximum gross that you can without
Right.
ripping everyone's head off. But
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. What are your thoughts on the future? I years ago, like we're talking years ago, I want to say over 6, 7 years ago,
okay.
I was having a conversation, don't even remember with who. It was here on the podcast for any of the enthusiasts that have cataloged my episode numbers. We were talking about the future of the business. And one of the sentiments that was shared was showrooms might get a little smaller, inventories might get a little bit smaller, and then actually the primary of the business, the primary driver would be fixed ops. I'm curious on your take. I'm curious, as inventory, we're seeing now inventory shrinks. We're seeing OEM executives and other analysts of the industry saying, "Hey, I don't think inventory numbers are going to return to where they were. Like, there's a new normal that we're establishing here." Could this mean that service departments become the primary driver? It's like few to choose from here. You'll get it shipped to your door, but we're going to be your primary service facility.
You know, it's so hard to say. I do think, I mean, we're already seeing it. Fixed ops is really kind of not taken over, but I think we're focusing more on it, and the fact that it is probably going to be more of the main driver because we're always going to need our cars maintained and serviced. In regards to parts, I do think that dealerships are going to move to, hopefully, a more online way to sell parts.
Right.
And I think that's kind of already happening, but like to a level of like having a marketplace and a true like shop for parts, and because there are the do it yourself people, and then there's people that just want to shop online and look at things or plan ahead. Um, so I do think a lot of things are going to go online for parts.
Mm. Which makes sense. Like, I feel like if you're going to try, see, maybe this is just the way my brain works. Maybe Kaylee, you're going to have to tell me if I'm crazy or not. But instead of starting with parts and saying, "Hey, here's this thing that would actually be really easy to sell online," we went directly to the most difficult thing to sell online, which we're like, it would be a good idea. Let's try and transact a vehicle online. It's like, but what about this air filter that we can just throw in a box and ship? No, no, no. Like, let's try. You know what I mean? Like, why aren't we
There,
already?
I think because it's a kind of overwhelming. Because if you think about how many parts there are per like the make, like
Okay, that's fair.
there's a
Yeah,
lot. So I think I don't think it makes sense like to sell every single part online.
right,
Um, because I mean, I think you just kind of have to, what needs to happen is figuring out the market and like what's going to sell, what your customers are looking for. And I mean, there's got to be ways to do this,
right,
and really track people because we're all being tracked all the time.
right.
So, yeah, I mean, I just feel like and then I was at Digital Dealer, and it was, who was it? Sean Rains. He had a
Hmm.
presentation on parts, and and service, and he touched a little bit on it, but he was talking about how um what's in the parts department physically, like all the fun stuff, the t-shirts, the water bottle, like just the cool stuff. None of that's online for anyone to buy.
Right.
So why is it not? I don't
Yeah,
know.
you're like, how come nobody's buying this? Because nobody knows it exists.
Exactly.
Yeah, what an interesting concept. And I love Sean, by the way. He's one of my favorite people in this industry.
Oh,
But
I
that
loved his presentation. He was funny.
he's hilarious. Yeah, he is he's a gem.
Yeah.
Um, but that makes sense. You're right. I can understand your point about how would you even keep track? I mean, that's a huge undertaking. I know there are systems out there that try and do this, but I mean, to your point, I think really valuable is, well, maybe we start with our most profitable, predictable sellers and we get those online and we test it. And maybe the water bottle or the tumbler and the t-shirt and the keychains and stuff, like, let's
Exactly.
try this.
Yeah.
And it immediately thinks of, there's this company I follow on YouTube called Revzilla. It's for motorcycles. I
Yeah.
love riding motorcycles. But this opens an interesting avenue for dealership on the marketing side of this department. Because what Revzilla does is they basically just do reviews on the products that they sell, good, bad, and everything in between. And what's interesting about it psychologically, Kaylee, is you don't hate, like, they're not worried about, oh, well, I can't trash talk this product I sell. It's a product I sell. No, they give you, hey, like this helmet, if your head's this shape, you might not like this because of the this,
Yeah.
but if you're this, they go through it all. And guess what happens? They make, don't fact check me on the number, but if buttload was a number, they sell buttloads of product
Mhm.
just going through. And I could see somebody, from a fixed perspective, simple backdrop, green screen,
Uh-huh.
table. Hey, today we're talking about this air intake, yada, 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 and why it's going to help the performance of your,
Yes.
2020 Toyota, whatever, you
Yes.
know, huge opportunity. What are your thoughts on that? Is that the way of the future, you think?
Oh, I think so. I think that dealerships need to do videos and talk about the accessories, the enhancements, the things that the cars that they're selling. Because I mean, if you think about it, what's after you buy a car, what's the first thing you want to do? You want to accessorize it. You want to buy. I mean, if you're buying a truck, probably the first thing is tires.
Yeah, right,
At least that's I mean, that's my personal opinion, but
right.
and wheels. But, but still, those should be offered to be able to sell online too. Like, I don't know, it's just there's huge opportunities, and I love that idea with, what do you call it? The cycle
Oh yeah, Revzilla.
Redzil yeah, like, taking videos and showing them, like, what all the different areas and how it can improve your car or your truck. It just shows people that's the way of selling, really. Talking about it, showing them on a
Yeah,
video. Yeah.
it's best known. Glenn Lundy said this this past week. We were in Phoenix together. He said, "Best known is better than best." And here's an opportunity for parts departments to become best known because I think to your earlier point, yeah, sure, okay, they're the second largest profit center,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean they need to play second fiddle. You know what I mean? To the sales side, they can be their own. They're not even playing the same music. They got to just go be their own band,
Yeah,
and you know what I mean. And I think there's a huge opportunity for that.
I do too.
Um, we've talked about online. We've talked about obsolescence. We've talked about where we see things going in the future with online part sales. Does any of this, in your opinion, translate to the metaverse? Are we going to, like,
Oh,
is there an opportunity for ABC Motors, the most popular dealership in the world, ABC Motors, to have a dedicated parts department in one of these, whatever they call it, Decentraland or whatever?
oh, I'm probably the wrong person to talk about the metaverse because when I learned about it, I was like, oh, I was just like in shock.
You were in shock. You're like, why don't you just go to the real parts department?
Well, I mean, so I see value in it. I see value because you have to appeal to different audiences. So there are going to be people that are going to go more towards that style way of buying or whatnot. So yeah, if I don't
If
even know what to
if
say.
an avatar wants to buy real parts in the fake world, then sure. That's what you're like, fill your boots.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. If you want
That's
to
awesome.
work on your vehicle in the metaverse virtually and kind of do that, if that's I don't know, because I really kind of don't quite understand it all. Like, are you living in the metaverse and doing like virtual things, or are
Right.
you buying the parts there and then they're physically getting delivered and then you work on your real car? Like, that's kind of like what I don't understand of the metaverse.
Right. I
Like,
think it might be more that. I think it might be more like you're there and there's the parts store and you buy the part
and
and then it shows up at your house
in
and
real
there
life.
you go. You got the part. I might be getting old and I wish I didn't feel this way, but I'm like, I could probably do it faster on like just in web too, like in the internet that's on the computer in front of me. But I'm always interested. I have to ask everybody and it's a mixed bag right now. There's
Yeah.
half of the people I ask that are like, I don't even get it. So there we are.
Right.
And then there's this other half that go into this big long diatribe of why the metaverse is anyways. So
I
that's interesting. Interesting take.
Yeah,
Um,
we're kind
you
of
had
our
mentioned
but
you had mentioned earlier the DMS. So when you work with dealers as it pertains to forecasting obsolescence, my new favorite word. Earlier you had mentioned DMS and how it's possible to do the to kind of track the obsolescence of inventory. Um, but is there an easier, more effective way? Is that what you've created on your side?
Yeah, we have. So we've simplified the reporting for parts managers. So the management report has always been so there's just a lot of different reports to look at. And you have to go to different areas, and every DMS is different. And we've just taken that and put it on one page basically and showed them their key categories. So then they're able to see, okay, my fourth category I need to focus more on, or my technical obsolescence, that's your forecasted obsolescence category, is not doing very well and we need to accrue more dollars type thing. So it's just seeing it all in front of you on one page and being able to make the tweaks within the DMS to and your process to be more efficient.
Right. And so then that's the back half of Parts Edges. You've got the consulting side of like, hey, change this, maybe work on that sort of a thing.
Exactly, and I'd like to take it to that next level of, like, we have those meetings to talk about the reports, but then we actually help them execute the stuff in the DMS that
Mm.
needs to happen. That's where I don't like to say consultant, because consultants kinda tell you what you need to do, and we actually kinda, like, help do it.
Yeah, you consultants are like, you know what you should do? Change everything about yourself. Okay, that'll be X number, and you pay them, and you're like, I don't know what that means. So you're
And
saying, hey, no, let's look at this together. Let's understand it together. Now let's execute. Let's put it into an action plan.
exactly, because every parts department isn't the same. Every
Right.
level of parts manager is different, so what we're gonna do is different for each level of parts manager, really. And we can see by looking at the numbers, okay, this is where we need to make changes, and then we do that within the DMS.
Yeah, it makes sense. I was chatting with my pal Scott Simons, and I asked him, I said, what's the one problem that you don't believe has been solved for yet? And I mean, he's part owner. I mean, he's at CMA Group, Liza Borch's their incredible CEO. He's a co owner. I want to say they're up to 19 stores. So I felt like he might have some really good perspective. What's the
Yeah,
one problem that has not been solved sufficiently yet? You know what he said? What you said made me think of it. He said, I wish there was just one quick report that I could look at that was quick, snappy, told me what I needed, and away I go. And everything out there currently is I got to dig through this report and cross reference to that report and this and that. And so I think it's really tremendous that you guys are solving for a very specific problem, and particularly in the stepchild department of the industry that doesn't get enough love and attention. Love that you guys are solving for that problem. Really enjoyed our conversation. How can those listening get in touch with you to learn more?
they can go to our website, so it's just www.partsedge.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so connect with me on there. Yeah, I mean, just reach out. I'm happy to help anyone that has any questions.
Kaylee Felio, thanks so much for joining me on the Dealer Playbook podcast.
Thank you.